Princess Isabella had always been told that servants should be invisible, mere shadows moving through the grand halls of nobility, seen but never truly noticed. But as she guided Prince Adrian's trembling hand to her face in the flickering candlelight of his chamber, she realized that some rules weren't just meant to be broken, they were meant to be shattered completely. The ancient castle of Valeria had become her gilded prison for 3 long, agonizing months. Ever since her father's once prosperous kingdom fell to the ravages of war, she had been forced to transform from princess to servant, trading silk gowns for rough-wool dresses and a crown for calloused hands. The irony wasn't lost on her. She, who had once commanded armies and negotiated treaties, now scrubbed floors and served meals to nobles who looked through her as if she were made of air. Nobody in this foreign castle knew she carried royal blood in her veins. To everyone else, she was simply Bella, a quiet, unremarkable girl who appeared one day seeking work with mysterious eyes that held depths no servant should possess. She had perfected the art of invisibility, keeping her head down, her voice soft, her true identity buried beneath layers of carefully constructed humility. But Prince Adrian was different. He couldn't see her torn dress or her work-roughened hands. All he knew was her voice, gentle and melodic, unlike the other servants who spoke to him with that particular tone reserved for the afflicted. When she spoke, he heard intelligence, kindness, and something else he couldn't quite identify, something that made his heart race in ways he'd never experienced. The prince had been blind since birth, a cruel twist of fate for someone born to rule. At 25, he had never seen a sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, never looked into a woman's eyes and watched them sparkle with laughter, never witnessed the beauty that everyone else took for granted. His world existed in perpetual darkness, but over the years, he had learned to navigate it through sound, touch, and an almost supernatural instinct that seemed to compensate for his missing sight. Despite his disability, or perhaps because of it, Adrian possessed a gentleness that was rare among royalty. He never raised his voice in anger, never dismissed anyone with cruelty, and somehow always seemed to know when someone was suffering. The servants whispered that he had a gift, that his blindness had opened other senses, allowing him to see into people's souls. That particular evening, as Isabella brought his dinner on a silver tray that had once graced tables in her own castle, something was terribly wrong. The prince sat hunched at the edge of his 4-poster bed, his usually perfect posture crumbling under some invisible weight. His hands shook as if he were fighting an internal battle, and his breathing came in short, labored gasps. "Your Highness," she whispered, setting the tray down on the ornate table near the window. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence. "Are you unwell? Shall I call for the physician?" Adrian's head snapped up at the sound of her voice, and she could see relief wash over his features. "Bella," he said, and her heart clenched at the way he spoke her false name, with such trust, such genuine affection. His voice cracked with barely contained pain. "I need you to help me with something. But you must promise me, swear to me on whatever you hold most sacred, that you will never tell another living soul what transpires in this room tonight." Isabella felt her pulse quicken. In the 3 months she had served him, bringing his meals and occasionally reading to him from the books he could never see, Prince Adrian had always maintained perfect royal composure. Even when struggling with his blindness, he carried himself with dignity and grace. Now he sounded desperate, almost frightened, and the vulnerability in his voice made her want to reach out and comfort him. "I promise," she said without hesitation, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "Whatever you need, Your Highness, I will help you." The prince stood slowly, moving with the careful precision of someone who had mapped every inch of his private chambers. He walked toward a large wooden chest in the far corner of his room, his fingers trailing along the stone wall for guidance. The chest was ornate, carved with intricate designs that seemed to shift and dance in the flickering candlelight. His hands moved across its surface with practiced familiarity until he found what appeared to be a completely seamless section of wood. Isabella watched in fascination as his fingers pressed against an invisible latch, and the chest opened with the softest whisper of hinges. "Every night for the past 15 years, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I must take a specific medicine." The court physicians prepared dozens of different tonics and elixirs, all designed to manage my condition. But tonight, I cannot identify the correct bottle in the darkness. They all feel identical to my touch, and if I take the wrong one, he trailed off, but the implications hung heavy in the air. Isabella stepped closer, her curiosity overcoming her caution. Then she gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. Inside the chest were indeed dozens of small glass bottles, each filled with liquids of different colors: deep emerald green, rich sapphire blue, warm amber gold. But what truly stole her breath wasn't the medicine. It was the letters. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all written in the most elaborate script she had ever seen. The ink seemed to shimmer and dance, catching light that didn't exist, glowing with an ethereal radiance that made her eyes water just looking at it. "Your Highness," Isabella breathed, unable to keep the wonder from her voice, "these letters, they are glowing." Prince Adrian went completely still, as if her words had turned him to stone. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "You can see them glowing?" "Yes," she whispered, reaching out tentatively toward one of the letters. "The writing looks like starlight captured on paper, like moonbeams made solid." The prince turned toward her, so quickly that she startled backward. His sightless eyes were wide with something between desperate hope and absolute terror. "Bella," he said slowly, each word carefully measured, "I must tell you something that could get us both killed. I am not merely blind due to some accident of birth. I am cursed." Isabella felt the world tilt around her. "Cursed? How?" Adrian moved closer to her, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the subtle scent of sandalwood that seemed to cling to his clothes. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years of hidden pain. 15 years ago, when I was just 10 years old, a woman came to our kingdom seeking shelter. She was clearly a traveler, dusty from the road, her clothes torn and patched, her hair wild from wind and weather. But there was something about her eyes. They held knowledge that seemed older than the castle itself. Isabella listened with growing dread. As Adrian continued, "My father, King Aldrich, was holding court that day. The woman approached the throne and begged for sanctuary, claiming that she was being pursued by those who would do her harm. She offered to serve the kingdom in exchange for protection, said she had skills that could benefit us all." "What happened?" Isabella asked, though she feared she already knew. "My father took one look at her, her poor clothes, her unkempt appearance, her lack of obvious wealth or noble bearing, and had her thrown out of the castle. He declared that Valeria had no need for beggars and vagrants, that we would not lower ourselves to harbor every wandering soul who appeared at our gates." Adrian's hands clenched into fists at his sides, and Isabella could see the pain the memory still caused him. As the guards dragged her away, she turned back to look at my father one last time. Her eyes, God help me, her eyes burned with such fury that I felt it even from across the great hall. She raised one trembling finger and spoke a curse that I can still hear echoing in my nightmares. Isabella waited, barely breathing, as Adrian gathered himself to continue. She said, "Aldrich of Valeria, you have shown me that your heart is closed to those who suffer. In return, your bloodline will know suffering. Your firstborn son will live in eternal darkness until he finds someone who can see magic itself, someone who can read the language of the heart made manifest. Only then will he understand what you have cost him. Isabella felt ice form in her veins. And that someone is you, Adrian finished, his voice filled with wonder and terror in equal measure. Those letters in the chest, they are written in ancient magical script. For 15 years I have tested every person who entered this castle. I show them the letters, hoping desperately that anyone might be able to read them. Every single time, they see nothing but blank parchment. Isabella looked back at the chest, her heart hammering against her ribs. The letters pulsed with that strange silver light, and she could read the elegant script as clearly as if it were written in her native tongue. "They are love letters," she whispered, in amazement, her voice filled with awe. "Someone has written you the most beautiful love letters I have ever seen." Prince Adrian's face went completely pale. His lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but no sound emerged. Finally, he managed to whisper, "What do they say?" Isabella picked up the first letter with trembling hands, afraid that her touch might somehow break whatever magic allowed her to see it. As she began to read, her voice grew softer and more emotional with each word. "My dearest Adrian," she began, and already tears were forming in her eyes. "Though you cannot see my face, I see your soul more clearly than I have ever seen anything in this world. Every day I watch you from afar, my heart breaking and soaring in equal measure. I watch you show kindness to servants who expect nothing from you. I watch you listen with genuine interest to problems that other nobles would dismiss. I watch you navigate your darkness with such grace that you illuminate the lives of everyone around you." Isabella paused, overwhelmed by the emotion in the words, then continued, "You are more beautiful than any man who has ever drawn breath, not because of your face or your form, but because of the magnificence of your heart. Your blindness has not made you bitter or cruel as it might have done to a lesser soul. Instead, it has made you infinitely gentle with those who suffer, endlessly patient with those who struggle, and somehow more capable of love than anyone I have ever known." She looked up to see tears streaming down Adrian's face, his expression a mixture of joy and heartbreak. "There's more," she whispered, looking back at the letter. "I love you not for your title or your wealth or your position. I love you for the way you pause to listen when someone is speaking, really listen, as if their words are the most important thing in the world. I love you for the way you never raise your voice in anger, even when others would be justified in their fury. I love you for your laugh, rare as it is, and for the way you find beauty in music and poetry and all the things that don't require sight to appreciate." Isabella's voice broke as she read the final lines. "I love you for your heart, my darling Adrian, not for your eyes. If I could take your darkness into myself and give you my sight, I would do so without hesitation, forever and always yours. Your secret admirer." As the last words left Isabella's lips, something extraordinary began to happen. A warm, golden light started to emanate from the letters themselves, growing brighter and more radiant with each passing second. The light spread outward, filling every corner of the chamber, banishing shadows that had existed there for years. Prince Adrian gasped, his hands flying to his face. "I can see light," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder and disbelief. "For the first time in my entire life, I can actually see light." Isabella looked at him and felt her breath catch in her throat. His eyes, which had always been clouded and unfocused, were now clear and bright. But more miraculous than that, they were looking directly at her, seeing her for the first time. The prince reached out with shaking hands to touch her face, his fingers trailing across her cheek as if he couldn't quite believe what his newly awakened eyes were showing him. You are so beautiful, he breathed, his voice filled with reverence. More beautiful than I ever dared to imagine, more lovely than every dream I've ever had. But Isabella stepped back, fear suddenly replacing the joy that had filled her heart moments before. The weight of her deception crashed down on her like a physical blow. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice shaking, "I must tell you something. I am not who you think I am." Adrian's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I am not a servant," she said, tears streaming down her face as the words tumbled out. "I have been lying to you from the moment we met. I am Princess Isabella of Astoria. My kingdom fell to war 3 months ago, and I have been hiding here, working as a servant to survive. Everything you know about me is a lie." Prince Adrian stared at her in stunned silence for a long moment. Then, slowly, incredibly, a smile began to spread across his face. Not the polite smile of royalty, but a genuine expression of pure joy. "You have been royal this entire time?" he asked, and she could hear laughter bubbling up in his voice. "Yes," she whispered, shame coloring her words. "I deceived you. I made you care for someone who doesn't even exist." "My darling girl," Prince Adrian said, his voice warm with love and amusement. "Do you truly not understand what this means?" Isabella looked at him in confusion, unable to comprehend how he could be laughing when she had just confessed to such a terrible betrayal. "The curse," Adrian explained gently, "could only be broken by someone of noble blood who truly loved me for who I am, not for my title or my wealth or my position. You loved me when you thought I was just a blind prince who needed help. You saw my soul before you ever saw my face. You cared for me when you had every reason to focus only on your own survival." Isabella felt hope beginning to bloom in her chest, but then reality crashed back down around her. "But the letters," she said desperately. "Someone else wrote those letters. Someone else loves you." Prince Adrian smiled and reached into the chest, pulling out another letter. He handed it to her with gentle hands. "Read the signature again," he said softly. Isabella looked down at the bottom of the parchment, and her heart nearly stopped. There, in the same glowing script, were the words, "Forever and always yours, Isabella of Astoria." "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never wrote these letters. I've never even seen this ink before." "Magic works in ways that mortal minds can barely comprehend," Prince Adrian said gently, taking her hands in his. "Perhaps your heart wrote them, even if your hand did not. Perhaps your love for me was so strong, so pure, that it reached across time and space to find me, to comfort me during the darkest moments of my cursed existence." As he spoke, the letters in the chest began to fade, their magical purpose fulfilled, but the golden light in the room continued to grow brighter, surrounding both Isabella and Adrian in its warm, protective glow. "There is something else I must confess," Prince Adrian said, his newly seeing eyes twinkling with mischief. "Now that the curse is broken and we are sharing our secrets, I can tell you mine." "What secret?" Isabella asked, though she wasn't sure she could handle any more revelations. "I knew you were not a servant from the very first day you arrived at our castle," he admitted with a grin that was both sheepish and proud. Isabella's mouth fell open in shock. "You knew? Your voice, your manner of speaking, the way you carried yourself even when you thought no one was watching. Everything about you proclaimed your noble birth. You can disguise your clothes and your circumstances, my dear, but you cannot disguise a lifetime of education and refinement." "Then why didn't you say anything?" she asked, her mind reeling. "Because I also knew you were hiding for a reason," he replied seriously. "Your eyes held pain and loss that spoke of recent tragedy. I assumed you were a noble who had fallen on hard times and needed sanctuary. I pretended not to know because I wanted you to feel safe, to trust me when you were ready." Isabella stared at him in amazement. So you fell in love with Princess Isabella, who was pretending to be a servant? I fell in love with your courage, Adrian said, his voice filled with deep emotion. I fell in love with your kindness toward others, even when you yourself had lost everything. I fell in love with your strength, your intelligence, your willingness to help a blind prince navigate his darkness. As they stood there in the golden light, Isabella realized that both of them had been living with secrets, both trapped by circumstances beyond their control. But together they had found a way to break free from the curses, both magical and mundane, that had bound them. What happens now? She asked, hardly daring to hope. Prince Adrian's eyes sparkled as he looked at her, still marveling at the miraculous gift of sight. Now, he said, reaching up to cup her face in his hands, we write our own story, not as a blind prince and a servant girl, but as two people who found love in the darkness and brought light to each other's world. But their moment of perfect happiness was shattered by the sound of heavy footsteps echoing in the corridor outside Adrian's chamber. Someone was coming, and they were moving with obvious urgency and purpose. Hide, Prince Adrian whispered urgently, his protective instincts overriding his joy. If someone finds you here at this hour, in my private chambers, they will assume the worst. Your reputation will be destroyed. Isabella started to move toward the large wardrobe in the corner, but it was already too late. The heavy wooden door burst open with a crash, and Prince Adrian's younger brother, Prince Marcus, strode into the room with 3 armed guards behind him. Marcus was everything Adrian was not. Tall where Adrian was average height, dark where Adrian was fair, and possessed of a cruel ambition that had always made Isabella uncomfortable during the few times she had encountered him in the castle corridors. Brother, Marcus said, his voice dripping with false concern and barely concealed satisfaction. I see your sight has returned. How remarkably convenient. Prince Adrian immediately stepped protectively in front of Isabella, though he knew it was futile to try to hide her presence now. Marcus, he said, his voice carefully controlled, what is the meaning of this intrusion? Why do you come to my chambers with armed guards? The meaning, Marcus replied, his cold smile growing wider, is that I have been waiting 15 long years for you to break that pathetic curse. Do you have any idea why I would be so interested in your magical recovery? Enlighten me, Adrian said, though Isabella could hear the dread creeping into his voice. Because, dear brother, Marcus said with obvious relish, the witch who cursed you so many years ago made a deal with me. A bargain that I have been anticipating for over a decade. Isabella felt ice form in her veins as Marcus continued his revelation. She told me that when your curse was finally broken, it would not simply disappear. Oh no, that would be far too simple, far too merciful. Instead, the curse would transfer to whoever was responsible for breaking it. Your precious servant girl will now live in darkness for the rest of her miserable life. Isabella watched in horror as the golden light in the room began to flicker and dim. She could feel shadows starting to creep in from the edges of her vision, just as Marcus had predicted. But that is not the most delicious part of my plan, Marcus continued, clearly enjoying their terror. The witch also told me that the person who breaks the curse will only be able to see for exactly 1 hour. After that they will be blind forever, and their sight will be transferred to the person who betrays them. Prince Adrian spun around to look at Isabella, his eyes wide with horror and desperate love. No, he whispered fiercely, I will not let this happen to you. I will find a way to stop this. You have no choice, Marcus laughed, the sound harsh and grating in the golden light. The magic is already at work. Look at her eyes, brother. Do you see how they are beginning to cloud over, just as yours did all those years ago? Isabella touched her face with trembling fingers, and realized with growing terror that Marcus was right. The world was growing dimmer around her, shadows creeping steadily inward, like a living thing intent on devouring her sight. "There has to be a way to reverse this," she said desperately, fighting against the encroaching darkness. "Oh, there is," Marcus replied with malicious glee. "The curse can be transferred again, but only through an act of ultimate betrayal. One of you must completely betray the other's trust. Then the curse will move to the betrayer, and the betrayed will be free." Prince Adrian immediately grabbed Isabella's hands, his grip desperate and fierce. "I will betray you," he said with absolute conviction. "I will do whatever it takes to save your sight. I have lived in darkness before. I can do it again." "No," Isabella protested, her voice breaking. "I will not let you sacrifice yourself for me. You have already spent 25 years blind. I won't be responsible for sending you back into that darkness." "Listen to me," Adrian said urgently, his voice growing more desperate as her vision continued to fade. "You have already lost one kingdom, one family, one entire life. I will not let you lose your sight as well." But Isabella, even as darkness crept closer, had an idea. It was dangerous, possibly foolish, but it might be their only chance to turn the tables on Marcus and his cruel machinations. "Marcus," she said, turning toward the prince's brother with more confidence than she felt. "You said the curse transfers through betrayal. But what if the real betrayer in this room is you?" Marcus frowned, clearly not understanding where she was leading. Isabella continued, her voice growing stronger even as her sight grew weaker. "You claim the witch made a deal with you, but I don't believe that's the truth. You've been working with her all along, haven't you? This entire curse, Adrian's blindness, the timing of everything, it's all been part of your plan to steal the throne." "That's ridiculous," Marcus sputtered, but Isabella could hear the lie in his voice, could sense his sudden nervousness. "Is it?" she challenged. "Prove your innocence then. If you're telling the truth about the witch approaching you, if you really are just an innocent bystander in all this, then you should be able to touch one of those magical letters without any consequences." She gestured toward the chest, where a few letters still glowed with faint magical light. "The letters can only be touched safely by someone with a pure heart, someone with genuine love and good intentions. If you've been plotting against your brother, if you've been working to keep him blind so you could inherit the throne, the magic will burn you." Marcus hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, Isabella knew with absolute certainty that she was right. Prince Adrian, even with his own vision beginning to fade as the hour of clear sight drew to a close, saw his brother's fear and understood. "You have been planning this," Adrian said, his voice cold with a fury. Isabella had never heard from him before. "All these years you've been working to ensure I remained blind. You want father to name you as heir because you believe a blind man cannot rule. So what if I have?" Marcus snapped, his careful facade finally cracking completely. "You think you deserve to rule just because you happen to be born first? You've been blind your entire life. How can someone who cannot even see his own kingdom possibly lead it?" "But I am not blind anymore," Adrian replied quietly, his voice deadly calm. "And now, for the first time, I can see you clearly. I can see exactly what kind of man you really are." As the truth was finally revealed, something magical and terrible began to happen. The curse, which fed on deception and betrayal, suddenly recognized who the real villain was in this story. It turned away from Isabella and Adrian like a living thing, rushing toward Marcus instead. The shadows that had been creeping over Isabella's vision suddenly reversed course, streaming toward Marcus like dark water. He stumbled backward in terror as the curse wrapped around him like chains made of pure darkness. "No," he screamed, his voice breaking with panic. This is not how it was supposed to happen. The curse should transfer to her, but it was too late. The curse, finally understanding who had been manipulating it all along, claimed its true target. Marcus's eyes went blank and sightless, and he collapsed to the floor, unconscious but breathing. Isabella felt her vision return completely, clearer and brighter than it had ever been. The golden light in the room blazed like a miniature sun, and Prince Adrian's sight remained perfect and strong. "Is it over?" she whispered, afraid to hope. "It is over," Adrian confirmed, pulling her into his arms and holding her as if he would never let her go. "The curse has found its rightful owner." The guards who had accompanied Marcus looked at each other in confusion and growing fear. Without their leader's orders, they had no idea what they should do. "Leave us," Prince Adrian commanded, his voice carrying an authority that Isabella had never heard before. "Take my brother to the physicians and see that he is cared for. He will live, but he is no longer a threat to anyone." The guards hurried to obey, lifting Marcus's unconscious form and carrying him from the chamber. Alone at last, Adrian and Isabella held each other in the golden light, both of them finally free from curses, free from secrets, and free to love each other openly and completely. "What will happen to Marcus?" Isabella asked, though she found it difficult to feel much sympathy for him. "He will live," Adrian replied thoughtfully, "but he will be blind, just as I was for so many years. Perhaps in the darkness he will learn the compassion and humility he never found in the light. Perhaps suffering will teach him what privilege never could." "And what happens to us now?" she asked, looking up into his clear, loving eyes. Prince Adrian smiled and took her hands in his, bringing them to his lips to kiss her fingertips gently. "We get married," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "We unite our kingdoms, your restored Astoria and my Valeria. We rule together as equals with both love and sight to guide us toward justice and peace." But your fool, Isabella worried, the practical part of her mind already jumping ahead to potential obstacles. "Will he accept me? I am from a fallen kingdom, and I have been working as a servant in his castle. My father has been searching for a way to break my curse for 15 years, Adrian replied confidently. "He has consulted with physicians, scholars, wise women, and traveling mystics. He has offered rewards, made bargains, and prayed to every god whose name he knows. When he learns that you were the key to my freedom, that your love was what saved his son and heir, he will welcome you not just as a daughter, but as a miracle." As if summoned by their very words, the chamber door opened once again. This time it was King Aldrich himself who entered, accompanied by Queen Elena. Both of them stopped dead in their tracks when they saw their eldest son's clear, bright eyes looking directly at them. "Adrian," Queen Elena whispered, tears immediately streaming down her face. "You can see. After all these years, you can finally see." "I can see, Mother," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And I want you both to meet the woman who gave me back my sight, and so much more. This is Princess Isabella of Astoria." Isabella immediately curtsied deeply, but King Aldrich gently raised her up with his own hands, his expression filled with wonder and gratitude. "Princess Isabella," he said solemnly, his voice carrying the weight of royal decree, "your kingdom may have fallen in battle, but you will rise again stronger than before. If you will consent to have my son, I would be deeply honored to call you my daughter and to welcome you as the future Queen of Valeria." Isabella looked up at Prince Adrian, her heart overflowing with love and hope, and a future that seemed almost too good to be true. "I will have him," she said, her voice clear and strong, "and I will love him faithfully for the rest of my life." As the royal family embraced, the golden light that had filled Adrian's chamber began to spread throughout the entire castle. Servants stopped their work to stare in wonder, as warm, magical light danced through the corridors like living joy. Guards found themselves smiling for the first time in years. Even the horses in the stables seemed to sense that something wonderful and transformative had occurred. The curse was not just broken, it had been transformed into something beautiful, something that would bless the kingdom for generations to come. And so Prince Adrian and Princess Isabella's story moved toward its perfect conclusion, a tale of love conquering not just blindness, but betrayal, deception, and the very darkness itself. Their wedding would be celebrated throughout both kingdoms, their reign would be marked by wisdom and compassion, and their love would become the stuff of legends. But that, as they say, is another story entirely.